The cantina's dim lighting cast long shadows across Vextar's scarred face as he stared into his drink. The amber liquid swirled slowly, reflecting the neon signs that flickered across the station's commercial district. Outside the viewport, stars stretched into infinity. But Vextar saw only ghosts dancing in their light. His forearms trembled slightly as he lifted the glass. Not from age, though his chitin bore the marks of countless battles, but from memories that clawed at his mind like hungry parasites. The Caltharian veteran had survived encounters with void serpents, faced down mechanical death squads, and walked through plasma storms that could melt steel. None of that compared to what humans had done to him. The cantina buzzed with the usual mix of species. Crystalline Zephyrians clinked like wind chimes as they communicated, while hulking Gorvac traders argued over shipping contracts in their guttural tongue. A few ethereal wisps floated near the ceiling, their translucent forms pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. All of them gave Vextar's table a wide berth. Word traveled fast in places like this. Everyone knew about the Caltharian, who screamed in his sleep. A young reporter slid into the opposite seat without invitation. Her skin had the pale blue tint of a Nexori, and her large eyes sparkled with the kind of curiosity that got journalists killed in frontier space. She wore a standard press jacket, the kind that supposedly protected you from angry warlords and plasma fire. Vextar had seen those jackets melted to bones before. Commander. Vextar. Her voice carried the crisp accent of the core worlds. I'm Kira Velthus from Galactic News Network. I'm here about the human war stories. Vextar's compound eyes focused slowly on her face. Each of his 6 pupils dilated independently, a reflexive threat assessment that had kept him alive through a dozen campaigns. The reporter didn't flinch, either brave or stupid. In his experience, there wasn't much difference. You want to know about humans? His voice rasped like grinding metal. About what we faced out there. He gestured to where his left arm should have been. The prosthetic replacement gleamed dully in the cantina's light, its mechanical joints clicking softly as he moved. This happened at New Sol Station. A human named Gino held that position for 6 hours alone. The reporter activated her recording device, a small crystalline matrix that would capture not just sound but emotional resonance. The fear, the pain, the absolute terror that still lived in his voice. She leaned forward eagerly, stylus poised. Over her datapad, "Tell me about Gino," she said softly. Vextar's laugh was bitter as reactor coolant. Gino wasn't even a soldier. He was a maintenance worker, 43 years old, soft around the middle, wore thick glasses that made his eyes look huge. Before the war, his biggest worry was keeping the air recyclers running on schedule. He paused, watching a cargo hauler drift past the viewport. Its hull bore scorch marks from recent pirate encounters, small burns that looked like insect bites compared to what human weapons could do. "We had intelligence on New Sol Station," Vextar continued. "Industrial platform. Minimal defenses, civilian population. Standard occupation protocol called for a quick breach, secure the command center, and establish control. Should have taken 20 minutes. The reporter scribbled notes, her stylus moving in the flowing script of her people. My assault team was the best the Caltharian military had to offer. 42 warriors, each one a veteran of at least 5 campaigns. We wore combat exoskeletons that could stop plasma bolts, carried weapons that could punch through starship hulls. We'd taken fortified positions from professional soldiers without breaking stride, its remaining arms clenched into fists. But when we breached the station's maintenance level, we found Gino waiting for us. Not hiding, not cowering, waiting. He stood in the middle of the corridor wearing nothing but his work coveralls and safety helmet, holding a plasma wrench like it was some kind of sacred weapon. A Zephyrion at the next table chimed softly, their crystalline form catching fragments of the conversation. They quickly looked away when Vextar's gaze fell on them. My squad leader Thraken actually laughed. Here was this soft human maintenance worker, facing down 4 dozen armed soldiers. Thrakon ordered him to surrender, speaking through our translation matrix in what we thought was reasonable basic. The veteran's voice dropped to a whisper. Gino looked at us for maybe 10 seconds. Then he smiled, not afraid, not angry, Just determined. He said something in his own language that our translators couldn't process. Later, we learned it was Korean. He was saying goodbye to his family. The mining colony should have surrendered immediately. Vextar's compound eyes stared past the reporter, seeing not the cantina's flickering lights but the red dust of Kepler 442b swirling in artificial atmosphere. His voice carried the weight of 3,000 nightmares. Basic tactical analysis was simple, he continued, his mechanical arm clicking as he gestured. 3,000 coalition troops against maybe 200 humans. Our battle computers calculated victory probability at 97%. Duration? For hours maximum. Paused, drinking deeply from his glass. The liquid burned down his throat, but it couldn't wash away the taste of defeat that had lingered for years. We didn't account for humans like Minho and Swa. The reporters. Stylus moved frantically across her datapad. Round them, the cantina's usual chatter seemed to fade as other patrons unconsciously leaned closer. Drawn by the raw pain in the veteran's voice. They were shift supervisors, Vextar said, his voice growing distant. Minho ran the night excavation crews. 42 years old, married, had 3 kids back on Earth. Swa managed the processing plant's brilliant engineer, could make broken equipment sing like new. Before the war, their biggest worry was meeting monthly quotas. A cargo drone drifted past the viewport outside, its lights blinking in the standard pattern. Vextar watched it for a moment, remembering similar drones turned into flying bombs. When our fleet arrived in the system, we gave them the standard ultimatum. Surrender, accept occupation, and no one gets hurt. Standard protocol had worked on 47 other worlds. Most colonial administrators were reasonable people they knew when they were beaten. His laugh was bitter as space ice. But Minho's response came back in perfect coalition standard. He said, "Thank you for the warning. We'll be ready for you." Reporter looked up from her notes. Ready how? That's what our intelligence officers wanted to know. Satellite scans showed normal mining operations continuing. Ore haulers moving on schedule, processing plants running at full capacity. No visible military preparations, no defensive positions being built. Our commanders assumed it was just civilian bravado. Vextar's remaining organic arms trembled slightly. We should have realized that humans don't separate military from civilian the way other species do. Every human is a potential warrior. Every tool is a potential weapon. A group of ethereal wisps floated past their table, their translucent forms. Pulsing with soft light, one of them hovered briefly, its telepathic probe touching the edge of Vextar's consciousness. It recoiled instantly, its light flickering with fear at the memories it had glimpsed. The landing was textbook perfect, the veteran continued. Dropships delivered our forces to 3 primary sites, the main processing complex, the administrative center, and the power generation facility. Secure those, and you control the colony. Simple. Yeah. He gestured with his prosthetic arm, the mechanical joints worry softly. But the moment our boots touched ground, everything went wrong. The humans had turned their entire mining operation into a fortress. Every tunnel became a kill zone, every piece of equipment a booby trap. The reporter leaned forward, her large eyes reflecting the cantina's neon glow. How Swa had rigged the atmospheric processors to explode if we tried to breach certain sections, not just small explosions. She'd turned them into fusion bombs. Our advanced teams triggered proximity sensors, and entire city blocks vanished in blue fire. Outside the viewport, a patrol cruiser drifted past, its hull scarred from encounters with pirates. Its weapons looked like toys compared to what the humans had improvised. Minho organized the miners to fight in shifts. When one group fell, another took their place. They used mining charges as grenades, or haulers as armored vehicles. Excavation. Mechs became walking tanks. Even their food dispensers had been weaponized. Vextar's voice cracked like breaking glass. We had superior numbers, better weapons, military training. They had something we'd never encountered before, the absolute refusal to accept defeat. A serving droid approached their table, its optical sensors scanning for empty glasses. It took one look at Vextar's face and quickly changed direction, mechanical instincts warning it away from predators. The siege lasted 3 months, he whispered. 3 months of fighting through corridors that humans had booby-trapped with their own lives? Volunteers would stay behind in collapsing tunnels just to take a few more of us with them. The reporter's stylus had stopped moving. She stared at the veteran, beginning to understand the scope of what she was hearing. SWA would broadcast daily reports, Vexstar continued. Not military communications, mining reports. Tonnage extracted, processing efficiency, equipment status. Like the war was just another work project. Her voice never changed, never showed fear or desperation. Professional updates. His compound eyes focused on something beyond the cantina walls. After 3 months, we had to orbital bombard our own positions just to stop them. Plasma bombardment from orbit, turning the entire mining complex into molten glass. It was the only way. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Even then, Vexter's voice was barely audible. The last transmission from the colony was SWA's voice. Clear as starlight, calm as deep space, she said, "Tell them we made our quota. We thought their rules of war were weakness." Gester's compound. Eyes reflected the cantina's pulsing lights as he spoke, each pupil dilating independently as memories surfaced like toxic gas from deep mines. The mechanical servos in his prosthetic arm whirred softly as he gestured toward the viewport, where distant stars burned cold and indifferent. "These Geneva Conventions they followed religiously," he continued, his voice carrying the bitter edge of hard-learned wisdom. Treating prisoners well, protecting civilians, limiting weapons usage. Even in the heat of battle, human soldiers would stop to help wounded enemies. They'd share their rations with captured coalition troops. The reporter's stylus moved across, her datapad capturing every word. Around them, the cantina's usual din seemed muted, as if the very air absorbed the weight of what was being said. "Commander Theses used to watch the footage from battlefield cameras and laugh," Vexstar said, his laugh harsh as grinding metal. "There'd be humans giving medical aid to Caltharian warriors who'd been trying to kill them minutes before. Human. Medics working 18-hour shifts to save coalition prisoners while their own wounded waited in line. A cargo hauler drifted past the viewport, its hull marked with the scars of countless battles. Its automated distress beacon pulsed steadily even now. Years after the war, space lanes weren't safe for lone travelers. Dices called them Geneva suggestions," the veteran continued. He'd mock how humans handicap themselves with mercy. During staff meetings, he'd play recordings of human commanders ordering their troops to evacuate civilian areas before orbital bombardments. Why warn the enemy? He'd say, why give them time to prepare? The reporter looked up from her notes. What did other coalition commanders think? Most agreed with this. We saw human restraint as tactical weakness. Their refusal to target civilian populations, their insistence on taking prisoners instead of eliminating threats, it made no military sense to us. Vexstar's remaining organic arms clenched into fists. We were apex predators trying to understand. Herbivores. We couldn't comprehend that humans had rules, not because they were weak, but because they were trying to stay civilized. A serving droid approached cautiously, its optical sensors scanning the table for empty glasses. Hesitated. When it registered the tension in Vexstar's posture, then quickly retreated to serve less dangerous customers. The turning point came during the Battle of Rigel 7, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. We'd captured a human field hospital medical facility, treating both human and coalition wounded. 53 prisoners total. Cantina's background noise seemed to fade further, as if reality itself was holding its breath. Among them were medics Hannah and Do-Yon. Hannah was barely 25, fresh out of medical school on Earth. She'd volunteered for frontier service to help colonists. Do-Yon was older, maybe 40, with steady hands and kind eyes. He'd been treating our wounded alongside their own for 3 days straight, staring into his drink as if it might contain answers to questions that had haunted him for years. I watched Hannah work on a Caltharian soldier whose abdomen had been torn open by shrapnel. She didn't speak our language, but she hummed while she worked some human melody that seemed to calm wounded warriors regardless of species. Do-Yon had jury-rigged their medical equipment to work with our different physiologies. The reporter waited as Vexstar collected himself, understanding that pushing now would shatter whatever fragile thread was keeping the story flowing. Commander Thesis arrived that evening for inspection. He saw humans and Coalition wounded being treated side by side, saw our enemies showing mercy to our people. It enraged him. He said it was propaganda, psychological warfare designed to make us soft. Patrol cruiser's searchlight swept across the cantina's viewport, its beam cutting through the darkness like a sword. For a moment, the light illuminated Vextar's scarred features before moving on. "This has ordered the execution of all 50 prisoners," the veteran continued, his voice now barely audible. Not a military decision, personal rage. He wanted to teach humans that mercy was weakness, that their rules meant nothing in real war. The reporter's stylus had stopped moving. She stared at Vextar, beginning to understand the horror that was coming. The executions were broadcast live across Coalition military channels. Standard intimidation tactics show the enemy what happens to captured personnel. Thesis wanted human commanders to see their medics and wounded soldiers dying helplessly. Vextar's compound eyes focused on something beyond the cantina walls, seeing ghosts that would never leave him alone. Hannah's last words were in Korean. We learned later she was asking someone to tell her parents she loved them. Doyon tried to shield younger prisoners with his own body until the end. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Within 6 hours, Vextar whispered, every human unit across 3 star systems had received the footage, not through military channels, through civilian networks, family communications, even commercial broadcasts. The entire human species knew what had happened.
Oh.
What happened then? The reporter asked, though part of her didn't want to know. We learned why humans called their rules conventions, Vextar said grimly, his mechanical arm clicking as he raised his glass with hands that trembled like leaves in a storm. They're not limitations designed to handicap human warfare. They're safety protocols. For everyone else, the cantina fell silent as Vextar's words hung in the air like smoke from his cooling drink. His 4 remaining hands trembled slightly, and the reporter noticed how the massive alien's breathing had become shallow. You have to understand, Vextar continued, his voice barely above a whisper. We thought humans were just another conquest. Small, fragile, limited to one planet. Our war computers calculated complete victory within 3 solar cycles. He paused, staring at the scarred metal table between them. We were wrong about everything. Executions had been broadcast across human space networks. 3 prisoners of war lined up on the deck of the Hegemony flagship. The alien commander had meant it as a message of dominance. Instead, it became something else entirely. Hugh was a maintenance engineer before the war, Vextar explained. Quiet, peaceful, fixed life support systems on mining stations. But when he saw that broadcast, when he watched his friend Doyon die, ... double quotes, the alien's voice trailed off. Something broke inside him. Or maybe something awakened. The reporter leaned forward. What happened next? Uke requested transfer to assault troops. Within 2 days, he was leading boarding parties. Our intelligence network started picking up chatter about this human who fought like he was already dead. His squad called him Ghost Walker because he moved through our ships like death itself. Vextar's remaining eye focused on something beyond the cantina walls, lost in memory. The first time he boarded one of our cruisers, we lost contact with the entire vessel in 47 minutes. When our rescue ships arrived, they found 200 of our warriors dead. Hugh's team had suffered 0 casualties. The alien shifted in his seat, the metal groaning under his weight. But the command ship assault, ... that was different. That was personal. The footage had become legendary throughout the galaxy. Security cameras tracked one human moving through the massive Hegemony dreadnought like a force of nature. Deck after deck, corridor after corridor, Huck carved his way toward the bridge. He took plasma burns that melted through his armor, Vextar recalled, shrapnel wounds that should have dropped him instantly. Our warriors hit him with everything we had. He just kept coming. The reporter watched as the alien's hands unconsciously moved to old scars across his torso. I was on that ship, 7th Deck Security Station. I watched him fight through my entire unit, 23 seasoned warriors, and he went through us like we were training dummies. Vextar's voice grew quieter. When he reached me, I was bleeding out from multiple wounds. He could have finished me. Instead, he knelt down and said something I'll never forget. "This is for Doyan. But you don't have to die for someone else's war." Then he moved on. The alien paused to take another drink, his hands steadier now. That's when I understood. This wasn't just warfare anymore. This was justice with a heartbeat. But Huck's assault was only the beginning. Across human space, the response to the execution spread like wildfire. Soldiers who had been fighting defensively suddenly became aggressive. Civilian populations began volunteering for combat roles. Even children were memorizing the names of the executed prisoners. Nari's squadron launched 3 days after Hugh's assault, Vexstar continued. 12 human fighters against our newest dreadnought, the Pride of Kethmer. Our ship had shields that could deflect meteor strikes, weapons that could crack moons. Reporter felt the tension building in the alien's voice. But Nari had something we'd never encountered before. She had 36 pilots who had volunteered for what humans call a suicide mission. The attack began like any other fighter engagement. Human ships darting between the massive alien vessel's weapon turrets, trying to find weak spots in its armor. But as the battle progressed, something changed. Our tactical computers couldn't predict their movements, Vexstar explained. They weren't trying to survive the engagement. We're trying to die in the most effective way possible. One by one, Nari's fighters began their final runs. Instead of retreating when damaged, they accelerated toward the dreadnought's critical systems. Engines, shield generators, weapon arrays, each pilot chose their target with mathematical precision. And they were singing, Vexstar whispered. Even as our weapons tore their ships apart, we could hear them on the communication channels. Ancient songs from their homeworld. Battle hymns passed down through generations. The alien's voice cracked slightly. Adi was the last one. Her fighter was barely holding together, engines trailing plasma fire. She could have ejected. Could have lived. Instead, she aimed directly for our main reactor housing. Star stood up slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the table. As she died, she transmitted one final message to our bridge. Doyen sends his regards, the Pride of Kethmer. One of the most powerful warships in the hegemony fleet, became a tomb for 8,000 alien warriors that day. Vexstar concluded, "We knew the war was over, just didn't know it yet." The cantina's ambient hum seemed to fade as Vexstar's words settled between them. Other patrons, creatures from dozens of worlds, had unconsciously leaned closer during his tale. Even the mechanical bartender had stopped its routine cleaning to listen. The ceasefire negotiations, Vexstar continued, his voice carrying a strange mix of respect and wariness. Those were when we truly learned what humans were capable of. The reporter's stylus hovered over his datapad, sensing this was the crucial moment of the story. Our high command expected to dictate terms to a broken species. We destroyed their outer colonies, blockaded their trade routes, eliminated their primary defense fleets. By every military calculation, humanity should have been begging for mercy. Vexstar's remaining eye fixed on the reporter with uncomfortable intensity. Instead, they sent one diplomat. It's one human in a simple transport ship. No escorts, no weapons, no protective fleet. Just Jiho, sitting across from our entire war council like he owned the room. The alien's voice took on an almost admiring tone. Our generals tried to intimidate him. Admiral Kexron showed holographic displays of human cities under siege. General Morthok presented casualty reports from the latest battles. Commander Vexenol demonstrated our new planet cracker weapons. Star paused, seeming to relive the moment. Jiho listened politely to everything. Then he opened his own presentation. The human diplomat had come prepared with information that made the alien war council's blood run cold. Population statistics, industrial output figures, resource allocation. Charts all presented with the calm efficiency of someone discussing weather patterns. He showed us images of human mining colonies being converted into weapons factories, Vexstar recalled. Asteroid processing stations that could produce warships instead of ore. Agricultural worlds whose farmers were volunteering for military service by the millions. The alien's hands clenched as he remembered. But the worst part was when he showed us the children. Human educational centers across their territory had begun teaching military strategy alongside mathematics. Young ones barely old enough to walk were learning basic engineering principles that could be applied to weapon construction. Even their artists and musicians were composing works that boosted morale and recruitment. Giho calmly explained that humanity's total population was 47 billion across 300 worlds. Vexstar continued. He then showed us recruitment projections if the war continued for another year. 200 million new soldiers. If it continued for 5 years, over 1 billion. The reporter felt a chill despite the cantina's warmth. Our entire military force was roughly 50 million across all species in the hegemony. Giho was describing an enemy that could replace their entire military force 20 times over. But the numbers were only the beginning. The human diplomat had brought detailed analysis of their industrial conversion capabilities, civilian spacecraft factories, retooling to produce fighters in weeks instead of months, medical research facilities developing new combat stimulants and healing technologies. Even their entertainment industry was creating propaganda that made their warriors more effective. Then Giho showed us something that made our war computers crash, Vexstar said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The human had presented footage from across human space, not of military installations or government facilities, but of ordinary citizens, families in their homes, workers in their factories, students in their schools, all preparing for extended warfare. Children were learning to build improvised weapons from household items. Elderly humans were training in guerrilla tactics. Artists were designing camouflage patterns. Cooks were developing nutrition plans for long-term siege conditions. Vexstar stood up slowly, his massive frame casting long shadows. Every human civilian was becoming a potential combatant. Every human world was becoming a fortress. Every human technology was being weaponized. The alien moved to the cantina's large viewing window, staring out at the star-filled void. "Cho, let us absorb all of this information." Then he smiled, and that smile was more terrifying than any weapon we'd ever faced. He said, "Gentlemen, this is what humanity looks like when we're being peaceful. Would you like to see what we become when we're truly angry?" The Hegemony War Council had seen enough. Giho wasn't finished. He presented one final projection. Vexstar continued. Human technological advancement during wartime, their innovation rate increased by 400% when faced with extinction. New weapons, new ships, new tactics emerging every month. The alien's reflection in the window looked haunted. Giho showed us designs for weapons we couldn't even understand. Theoretical technologies that could crack planets, devices that could manipulate gravity itself, biological weapons that could adapt to any defense we developed. The reporter realized he'd been holding his breath, and this human diplomat leaned back in his chair and spoke the words that ended the war. "Of course, we prefer peace. It's more efficient. We can accomplish much more when we're not distracted. By having to kill you?" Vexstar turned from the window, his expression mixing fear and admiration. That's when we understood the truth. Humans don't fight wars. They solve problems. And we had become their problem. The alien walked slowly back to the table. Every species in the galaxy has soldiers. But humans are all soldiers all the time. Their engineers think like generals. Their doctors plan like strategists. Their children play games that teach them warfare. He sat down heavily. We weren't fighting a military. We were fighting an entire civilization that had evolved to survive anything the universe could throw at them. Every human invention, every human song, every human story was a weapon waiting to be used. Vexstar picked up his empty glass, staring into its depths. The surrender documents were signed within hours. Not because we were losing battles, but because we finally understood what we were fighting against. Evolution itself, shaped by millions of years of surviving on a death world, refined by generations of conflict, and focused by the simple desire to protect their own. The cantina had fallen completely silent. Creatures from across the galaxy sat motionless, absorbing the implications of what they'd heard. "That's why I'm here," Vexstar said finally, standing to leave. "Learning from humans, understanding them. Because the next species that underestimates humanity won't get the chance to surrender. He walked toward the exit, then paused. We thought we were conquering a primitive species. Instead, we discovered we were fighting the universe's most successful predator. And we were lucky. They decided to let us live. The massive alien disappeared into the corridor beyond, leaving the reporter alone with his notes and the profound realization that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was simply being human.